Good morning.
Hey.
Hi. Oh, look, we have new flowers today. This is great. Sunflowers. So
No, Caberas.
Oh, those aren't sunflowers. Oh, sunflowers are
Huge.
different.
Well,
yeah,
they're large. Yeah.
What session are we on? 61?
Yes, we are.
All right.
What should we talk about?
I think we need to talk about the continuation of that fun letter we were on.
Yes. Very good. Before, though, I want to add a little more information about who HPB was, because we've been delving into her personality and her connection with the Mahatmas. And that's very crucial because she's the only one, as we've pointed out, who managed to get this tight of a connection with them that they could actually enter her physical body and operate through it. Not just her own master, Morya, but several different ones who were involved in writing Isis Unveiled. So I want to point out, remember the episode where she went through this horrible trial that was so excruciating that she wasn't even sure if she was going to survive? And this was right after her problem with the leg, where again, she thought she might die. But this trial that she went through, which was encountering the dweller on the threshold, was absolutely crucial to her being able later to merge her consciousness with that of Morya. Without that, we wouldn't have any of this stuff because, as we found out, her connection was not bad, but it wasn't great either before this transformation that she went through.
She's gone through a lot. She's been put through a lot.
And she, all along, was adamant failure is not an option. One way or the other, I'm going to get through this. And if it kills me, it kills me. I'll try in the next lifetime.
I know somebody else like that.
Really? Well, good. You should stick close by them.
I
know. So I want to point out something. I read all kinds of different sources. This one is a little book that Annie Besant wrote. It was written around 1907 or 1908. She had access to all of the archives at Adyar, and she collected all the information she could to help exonerate HPB from this claim that the SPR made that, number one, she was a spy for Russia, and that, number two, she invented the Mahatmas and wrote all of the letters herself. So this is a little book that she wrote with all of that information collected. It's called H.P. Blavatsky and the Masters of the Wisdom, and it's available online in PDF form if anyone wants to read it. But on page 69, this is a document that Annie Besant found where HPB was writing and telling people why she couldn't be a fraud and why she wasn't a fraud. She said something very interesting. I suffer for my misdeeds of centuries ago.
Karma.
From centuries ago. I know for what I suffer and bow low my diminished head in humility and resignation. I know I did something terrible and I have to pay for it and I accept it. But I bow only to karma and my master. So there was a reason that she went through these terrible trials. Now I came across something else. I don't know how many people read the books of Alice Bailey. A lot of them avoid them at all costs.
You have a few behind your head in the screen there.
Yes, and I've read most of them. If you look inside many of them, you'll see that they are filled with underlines and notes. on every single page. About 20 years ago, I all of a sudden got the inspiration or the idea that I needed to start reading these. I started with Letters on Occult Meditation and proceeded from there. But two of the most important ones I've found are called Discipleship in the New Age. And this one is volume 2. In a future episode, we will talk a little more about the writings of Alice Bailey, which, if she was telling the truth, weren't her own writings at all, except in the very few books where she said they were her own writing. And if you read the ones that are supposedly from DK, the information and style is completely different. So where it came from, I can't prove, but she says it's from DK. And all I know is that the information is really, really helpful. In this book, Volume 2 of Discipleship in the New Age, DK makes a statement. I won't read the whole thing, but he was talking about how chelas sometimes cause the most problems for masters. Imagine that. Imagine that. And that sometimes they don't realize how much harm they're causing. But it is a problem. So he mentioned that he had some people in his own ashram. Ashram is not a location.
It could be used to describe a physical location, a physical practice space, but it doesn't have to.
But for the Mahatmas, they have an ashram that covers the entire world. And they have individuals that are members of that ashram. Some of them are really close to the center, which is where the master is. That's the sun in the solar system. Some of them are way out past the
Kuiper belt, or Pluto.
They're way on the outskirts of it. And they have to be, because it all depends on the purity of that individual as to how close they can bring them. You can have a chela that is way, way out in left field, but their connection with the Mahatma is going to be very tenuous because they haven't developed it yet. So he was saying that in a previous lifetime, HPB caused enormous damage to her own master's ashram, Morya's.
So in her previous life, she was still a chela, though.
Oh, yes. This was not her first go-round. Of course not. Most of us have done the same thing in more than one lifetime. But he pointed out that she caused damage, and I suspect, I have no way to prove, but I suspect that that's what she was talking about when she said, I know why I am suffering. He also says that she was, guess who in a previous life?
Oh, gosh.
Someone we've mentioned. Cagliostro.
Oh. A master.
Yeah.
He was an adept.
Not an adept, but he was obviously on the path. And if you read the information, it's very sketchy. Most of the information online says that he was very nefarious. I doubt that he was as bad as they make him out to be, but he was somewhat devious, I take it. And if that was HPB, and if she were trying to redeem herself in this most recent lifetime, it all kind of makes sense. Again, this is information that we have no way to prove, but it may help us understand how this whole system operates.
Did you just happen to pick up that book over the past couple of weeks and
Yes.
and just browse through it?
And it happens so often. I will have something on my mind that I'm trying to work out. I use it in meditation, and boom, I open a book and there's information on it. I've had that happen so many times in my life that I'm used to it now. Now, one thing I want to point out, it's okay to have heroes, theosophical heroes, spiritual heroes in your life. But I ask you not to lionize them so much that you refuse to acknowledge that they have any defects or faults. They all have faults.
Don't pedestalize them. That's a word.
Yes, and guess what? When you put people up on a pedestal, they usually get shot down. So, yes, she was a human. As we're seeing, she had some major problems, and yet she worked through those. So if we have other heroes, I've had several that I just thought were on the very threshold of divinity, and later found out they weren't anywhere close. They had some really serious problems. Did I discard them? No, they're still my heroes, but I realized that I can learn from the mistakes that they made. I don't have to make the same mistakes and go round and round in circles, lifetime after lifetime. So let's just keep that in mind. It doesn't help to refuse to acknowledge defects in your heroes.
This might be a good time to briefly touch on this topic in a different context, though. In this modern day, there is still very much the concept of teacher and student, and in the yoga world specifically. What advice could we give students on finding a teacher? HPB, just in the quote you read, called Morya my master. And I think that could be a little dangerous for some people to find someone that they prostrate in front of and just dedicate their whole lives to this person. Now, I'm not saying HPB did this, but that could imply that the master that you're worshiping or the master that you're devoting yourself to is infallible, is insulated, is immune from humanity's faults and ups and downs that every human goes through. What should we say to students about finding a teacher or a master? Do we find one and then ignore all others? No, right? We do not suggest that at all. What should we say about that?
What I say is that it's not the student who looks for a master. Have you ever heard this saying, when the pupil is ready, the master appears? The master knew about the pupil lifetimes before the pupil ever heard that there was such a thing as a master.
But in this day and age of so many teachers, people do need direct instruction, and they're going to find it somewhere. What we should offer is don't put on blinders. Yes, you can study a certain tradition. We hope this might be one of your traditions that you consider studying, but be open-minded at the same time.
Yes, and always be willing to change direction. Mm-hmm. If you're following one teacher, whether it's just reading their books or whatever, watching their videos, and then you find out that they're maybe not as ethical as you thought they were, that doesn't mean you have to give up everything, but it means you have to practice discernment. What parts of the teaching are still valid and what parts are maybe some that I need to look at a little more carefully? Discernment is always the number one requirement because you cannot progress without it.
It also stands to reason that there are very valid teachings that come from teachers that we may not want to associate with in a direct way because energy is transferred. We've mentioned the word Shaktipat before, and Shaktipat can be a gift from a teacher or a wise person, a touch of enlightenment or a satori or just a constant or a frequent connection of energy that we may be fortunate enough to have with our teacher or with a teacher. But that type of energy transfer can also be either intentionally nefarious on either side, which we're talking about right now, or accidentally harmful, which can also happen. Without going too far into it, teachers could intentionally give their students a type of energy that may not be purely white magic for various reasons. And same thing on the opposite side. And that's what we're talking about. HPB might have done in a past life, either intentionally or unintentionally given energy in a way that was not helpful. With this being said, be mindful of the teacher you study with and associate with. Even if their teachings are valid, you may decide at some point you don't want a connection with that teacher directly.
The number one thing for a wannabe chela is to purify every vehicle, mental, emotional, physical, as much as possible. If you aren't purified, you're not going to be able to recognize what is real and what is not.
Yeah.
And get rid of your ego. It will absolutely kill you. Trust me, it will kill you. It will reduce your quality of life. It will reduce your energy. It will suck your energy out of you. And if that causes you to die, it doesn't care. It will simply latch on to someone else because your ego is an elemental. It's a focus of energy on the astral plane. And many of us, that is our master. Our ego is our master. That's who we worship. But that's really misplaced focus of energy and worship. Worship your inner self. That's where you will find your real master. All right. We promised you something this session. What was it?
I don't know. To finish the letter?
Well, we never finished. No, KH had promised Sinnett.
Oh, a picture.
Well, Sinnett had asked, can you look at people's past lifetimes?
Oh, right,
and he
right.
said, unfortunately, I can. And he said, well, if you can, would you mind telling me a little bit about my previous lifetimes? And KH said, well, I don't have much time, but if I get to it, I may share something with you that I will use to test your intuition. So let's see what that is. It ends up being Folio number 6 in the British Library. It was in with all of the Mahatma Letters, and it was never published in anything about it specifically in any version of the Mahatma Letters. But I'm going to have Paul read what Joy Mills wrote about it, about Folio 6.
The Mahatma tells Sinnett that while he does not like to use his ability to look back on previous incarnations, he may, quote, someday treat you to a little story, giving Sinnett only, quote, a hint or two to test your intuitional powers. This little story may appear in part in Folio 6 of the Mahatma Letters in the British Museum Library, although it was not included with the published letters. She says it may appear, meaning she can't prove it.
Well, we don't know if everything that he received was turned over to the British Museum, so there may be other material that he kept aside.
We would assume that this is it, though. Not that it may appear, but it does appear.
This part that is in the museum is part of it, for sure. We just don't know if it's everything that he received.
Okay. The story relates to Germanicus Caesar. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Now, that's not, who's the famous Caesar?
Well, Julius Caesar.
But, right. Okay.
Now, and we can point out, too, the Romans had a system of hierarchy, of course. Caesar was a ruler. It's a title, but it doesn't mean that every Caesar was emperor. Caesar, who was also emperor, was over the whole realm. A Caesar could be over a certain section or have certain duties. And that's what Germanicus was. He was a Caesar, but not an emperor.
Do you think the word Caesar is related to the Russian word Tsar?
Yes.
Sounds similar.
And what else? Kaiser.
Oh. What?
German.
Oh, German. Okay.
Yeah,
Kaiser.
exactly. Tsar, Kaiser, and Caesar. That. Yeah, they're all related. Remember, C in Latin, in formal Latin, is pronounced K. So it would have been pronounced Kaiser.
Wow. And so the name Germanicus, that relates to Germany too.
Right. Now, go ahead and read that, and then we'll give you all the background.
The story relates to Germanicus Caesar, born in 14 BC.
It turns out he was actually born in 15. The researchers actually know the actual date when he was born.
Wow, right around the time of Christ, my gosh. Who was sent to Germany in 13 AD to subdue the German tribes. He captured, among other prisoners, Thusnelda, the wife of a German chieftain who had been killed in one of the engagements. On his return to Rome, Germanicus was accorded a triumphal parade that included Thusnelda, along with other prisoners and spoils of war. Oh my gosh.
Every victor gets a parade, apparently, and they bring all of the captives and all of the spoils to show off, look what I did.
The item in Folio 6 of the letters consists of an envelope, a note signed by the Mahatma KH, and a photocopy of a painting titled in German, Thusnelda in Triumphzug des Germanicus. I wonder how I did on that pronunciation.
And this, I believe, is the painting. And he had a copy of this painting, apparently. This was painted around 1875 and is in a museum in Germany today. So you can still go look at it if you want. Go ahead and continue.
The painting depicts a Roman conqueror watching German prisoners being paraded before him. In the group is a young woman, obviously Thusnelda. What a name, Thusnelda.
Yeah.
The note signed by KH reads, quote, left behind. It is from Mali's, or Mati's, dust basket, and I saved the fair Thusnelda, with whose beauty you were so struck, and Germanicus, for both of whom he, Mali, had already prepared a bed of infamy in a neighboring gutter. Mali, or Mati, is not identified, but may have been a servant who cleaned house for KH.
So, yeah, we're not sure who this person was that threw it out, but obviously KH rescued it because there was meaning to it. Next, we need to look at some information about who this Thusnelda might be. So that I found in this booklet, Autobiography of Alfred Percy Sinnett, written by the man himself. He wrote this when he was old. He died in 1921. He wrote this the last 10 years, basically, that he lived. It's about 70 pages, maybe, and it is available as a PDF online. You can read the entire thing. It's very instructive about his life.
Should we add the links to that PDF and the other PDF in the video?
Yes, we will. So, what does he say about Thusnelda? Nothing, but let's see what he does have to say. He said, I was incarnated in Rome in the 1st century AD with all the favors of fortune around me, wealth and high rank amongst them, and with Vera in her then current incarnation as my wife.
We had a wife, Vera.
Vera. So do you remember when we first talked about Sinnett and Hume, I think around session number 9, I believe? Well, when he was working for the Globe newspaper, he was about 19 years old, and he was still living with his mother. And he said on Sundays, he and a friend of his would go out and join this group of volunteers. They would do some kind of maneuvers of some sort. He said, these were very enjoyable experiences for me. Then the volunteer movement began, and 3 of us, Herbert Stack, myself, and Mr. George Hooper, also on the staff of the Globe, joined the South Middlesex Corps, commanded by Lord Ranelagh. After drills, we would sometimes have an evening meal at Hooper's, and on one such evening, I met there Vera. She was of German birth, with a glorious contralto voice, and had come to England with a view to making her way as a concert singer. So Do you remember the German girl that he met when he was young? Probably not. He was completely smitten with her. He never, ever got over her. Even at the end of his life, he still pined for this unrequited love. She had a father who was a preacher in Germany, and he came over and met Sinnett, realized that he didn't have anything going for him really at 19 years old. So when he pursued her after she went back to Germany, she never responded, but the father sent back a letter and said, "Forget you ever knew her." And that was the end of that. But Sinnett never got over that. So who is Thusnelda and who is Vera? They're one and the same person. But who are they? All right, Thusnelda was born about 10 BC, 10 years before Christ. And she was the wife of Arminius, who was born around 18 BC and died around 21 AD. People who engaged in battles in those days didn't tend to live very long. 40 years seems to be a pretty average life range. In fact, Germanicus had a very similar life range. He was a Cherusci leader. And the Cherusci region is part of what later became Germania. And Germania is the original part of Germany. It's in the northwestern part of what is Germany today. So they have existed for at least 2,000 years.
The name sounds very Eastern European, not Western European.
It does, yeah. And who knows where they came from? I don't know. But he was one of their military leaders, Arminius, and the chieftains at the time would send their sons to Rome to be trained by them, and they were pro-Roman. Germania, pro-Roman, helping them to fight wars, and figured that they would learn in the process. But at some point, many of them turned around and started fighting against the Romans, and that's what Arminius did. So he had several successful battles and destroyed 3 legions of Roman soldiers.
Wow.
I forget how many is in a legion, but it's several thousand soldiers. 3 of them he destroyed. And Germanicus wasn't very happy about that because he was the one that had been assigned to get that area under control. So what did he do? He couldn't kill Arminius, but he did manage to capture his bride. She had a little boy who was just a few years old, and she was pregnant. The little boy wasn't actually Arminius's son because he had captured her in a previous battle with his own tribe. He captured her, married her, and now she's carrying his child. And then she gets captured with her existing child from some other man and paraded before Germanicus Caesar. So that's what this painting was all about. And it's quite interesting. If you look at the details, Caesar looks like he's falling asleep up on his throne. He's surrounded by a harem of concubines, and they did have concubines as well as their wife. And there are several different animals in here. So that is the story of Germanicus. He said that Vera, who is obviously Thusnelda in this lifetime, was his wife. So that would make him Arminius. I think Joy Mills had the idea, because she never mentioned Arminius, I think she had the idea that he may have been Germanicus.
That's what it sounds like. And doesn't Sinnett himself allude to the fact that he was Germanicus?
He kind of intimates, but he doesn't come right out and say it.
I wonder if he failed the test then, because if he's actually Arminius, not Germanicus, He didn't use his intuitive powers well enough.
Exactly. And that's what KH was after, was to see.
If he could figure it out himself.
But what he did say was, I was incarnated in Rome in the 1st century AD with all the favors of fortune around me, wealth, and high rank amongst them.
Either one. That describes either one, Germanicus and Arminius.
So he's kind of leaving it vague. But then later he said, my wife, speaking of that woman.
So maybe he got it right then, maybe.
We don't know. It's one of those mysteries, but intriguing.
In terms of timeline, that would make sense, actually, with the amount of time spent in Bardo. That was probably his immediate last incarnation.
It's hard to say, because once he was on the path...
It happens faster.
It does happen faster.
So 1900 years might be too long to spend in Bardo, or 1800 years, rather.
Yes, and we're going to find out later that there's another problem. After KH cut off communications with Sinnett, he was desperately looking for any way to get back in contact because he was convinced that HPB was manipulating everything. So what did he do? He used mediums and clairvoyance.
After everything.
After all this, we're going to see more about this, how he ended up in that direction. Very intriguing. Stay tuned. All right, now let's get back to this letter. What letter is it we're on? 93A. Remember, these are questions and answers that Sinnett had written down and KH had answered, a long list. So one by one, we're going through all of these. We got to question number 4. I'm reading Sinnett's questions and Paul is reading KH's answers. To what epoch did the existence of the continent of Atlantis belong? And did the cataclysmic change which caused its extinction come in at a predetermined place in the evolution of the round, corresponding to the place occupied by obscurations in the whole Manvantaric evolution?
To the Miocene times. So that's the epoch.
Yes, and when is that?
How many millions of years ago?
It lasted between 23 million years ago and 5.3 million years ago. So this is the period of Atlantis. And scientists wonder why there aren't many traces of it.
Well, I wonder what mainstream science says the continents looked like back then, because clearly they had moved, and it's accepted that they do move.
They knew that, but they didn't have nearly as much information as we do 140 years later.
To the Miocene times, everything comes in at its appointed time and place in the evolution of rounds.
Very interesting. Everything comes in at its appointed time and place. In other words, it's pre-planned. They know in advance when things are going to happen. The major events are going to happen.
Otherwise, it would be impossible for the best seer to calculate the exact hour and year when such cataclysms, both great and small, have to occur. Yeah, but the cataclysms are caused by free will and choice, so it can't be completely pre-planned down to the day. I mean, free will and choice. If the Atlanteans were a little nicer, it would have sunk a little later in time.
Well,
if they're a little more mean, it would have happened earlier.
Let's see. We're going to get more information that's going to enlighten us.
Okay. All an adept could do would be to predict an approximate time, whereas now events that result in great geological changes may be predicted with as mathematical a certainty as eclipses and other revolutions in space.
Now, what I think he's saying here is that the minor events cannot be predicted with any great accuracy, but the major ones, yes. And the reason is because everything always happens in a certain order. So let's continue.
The sinking of Atlantis, the group of continents and islands. Oh, so the group of continents and islands. Sometimes Atlantis is referred to as a continent, but it would make sense that it was more than one landmass.
Right. Yes, because Pangea, as I understand it, broke apart, and when it does, it is moving, you're going to have smaller ones breaking off. Mm-hmm. So then later at a certain point, they began congregating again and moving together, breaking apart, coming back together.
The sinking of Atlantis, the group of continents and islands, began during the Miocene period. Just as certain of your continents are now observed to be gradually sinking, oh wow, and it culminated first in the final disappearance of the largest continent, an event coinciding with the rising of the Alps.
And the Alps rose when? Let's see, around 65 million years ago.
From its beginning then, when Atlantis begins, then it's already sinking.
Might be.
The very first sentence he says is, Atlantis belongs to the Miocene times.
And I'm assuming he means at its peak or when it was really increasing. In the beginning, it's going to be very, very slow. It's going to take a long time to build up.
We might need to look at that, though, because it says it culminated, the sinking culminated first in the final disappearance of the largest continent, and that coincided with the rising of the Alps, and second, with that of the last of their fair islands mentioned by Plato. The Egyptian priests of Sais told his ancestor Solon that Atlantis, that is, the only remaining large island, had perished 9,000 years before their time. This was not a fanciful date, since they had for millenniums preserved their records most carefully. But then, as I say, they spoke only of the Poseidonus. Now, when he's talking about they, it's Plato and the...
He's talking about the Egyptians, because Solon was, let's see, an Athenian statesman and philosopher who lived from about 630 BC to 560 BC. He was an ancestor or a progenitor, I believe, of Plato.
Okay.
So he traveled to Alexandria in Egypt, and the priests there instructed him, but he wasn't given some of their secret information.
But then, as I say, they spoke only of the Poseidonus and would not reveal their secret chronology, even to the great Greek legislator, Solon. As there are no geological reasons for doubting, but on the contrary, a massive evidence for accepting the tradition, science has finally accepted the existence of the great continent and archipelago, and thus vindicated the truth of one more fable.
Now, science went back and forth. At one point, they were investigating the whole story of Atlantis, and they decided, yeah, there is some very valid proof that it did exist. Later, they switched and said, it's just a myth.
The great event, the triumph of our sons of the fire mist, the inhabitants of Shambhala, when it was still an island in the Central Asian Sea, over the selfish, if not entirely wicked, magicians of Poseidonus, occurred just 11,446 years ago.
So, yeah, again, right at the very end of it. And I think this is what is described in the secret doctrine as the very end of the dark forces of Atlantis. And it's talking about the destruction by the good forces of the evil forces, and how they had flying ships that they hoped to escape this catastrophe that was happening. And the good forces caused them to fall asleep, and they didn't awaken in time to escape.
And that's the triumph of the Sons of the Fire Mist. They succeeded in wiping out the evil people.
Right.
Okay.
And Sons of the Fire Mist refers to second generations. We'll get to that in just a minute.
Okay. Read in connection with this the incomplete and partially veiled tradition in Isis, Volume 1, pages 588 to 94, and some things may become still clearer to you. Oh, we got to do that. We got to read that.
Okay, you read it and report on it next time.
Okay, where is it? Where's Isis? There it is, right there.
One caveat, though. When you see references like that, that's to the first edition pagination. So you have to find a copy online. My copy is actually slightly different. So you have to find a copy, a PDF online, which is there, and you can read that information for yourself.
With proper pagination. All right. Wow. That was question 4.
Yeah. Question
Juicy.
5. I find that the most common question asked about occult philosophy by fairly intelligent people who inquire about it is, does it give any explanation of the origin of evil? That is a point on which you have formerly promised to touch, and which it might be worthwhile to take up before long.
It certainly does, and I have touched upon the subject long ago in my notes on Mr. Hume's manuscripts on God, which he kindly adds to our philosophy, something the brothers had never contemplated before. The subject is mentioned abundantly.
And if you remember when we discussed letter 88, the God letter, evil was talked about extensively. This is why I say, even though Hume and Sinnett were both living in Shimla at the time, they don't seem to have been communicating. And it's almost certainly because Hume got angry and left the chat, so to speak, and isn't even communicating with Sinnett right now.
That's funny. Hasn't he let you look at it? For you, I may enlarge my explanations, but not before you have read what I say of the origin of good and evil in my notes to him. Quite enough was said by me for our present purposes. So far, our universal pundit only threatens to alter his preface and not to publish the philosophy under his own name. I begged him not to publish his essays at all. Oh my gosh.
Meaning Hume.
Oh, yeah. Morya thinks that I'd better give you a few more details on Atlantis. Oh, wow, that's cool.
So Morya, of course, is aware of all that's going on. So he says to his buddy, KH, you probably should give him a little more information because you didn't cover this previously, how evil plays a part in the destruction of Atlantis.
Since it's greatly connected with evil, if not with its origin. Oh, wow. Evil might be connected with Atlantis' origin.
Well, the origin of evil.
Oh, Atlantis would be connected with the origin of evil.
Remember that in the first and second root races, there was basically nothing evil.
We were not even fully physical.
And in the third, it only started becoming a problem towards the end of that. So it reached a climax in the fourth root race.
So the Hyperborean continent, not really physical people yet. The Lemurian continent, not physical.
Lemuria was physical, but probably still not quite as dense as what we have today.
Mm-hmm. Then Atlantis. Wow, this is fascinating. In the forthcoming Theosophist, the magazine, you will find a note or two appended to Hume's translation of Eliphas Levi's preface in connection with the Lost Continent. And now, since it seems I am determined to make a book of the present answers, please bear your cross with Christian fortitude, and then perhaps, after reading everything, you won't ask for more for some time to come. But what can I add to what you've already been told? I am unable to give you purely scientific information since we can never agree entirely with Western conclusions, and ours will be rejected as unscientific. Yet, both geology and paleontology bear witness to much that we have to say. That's cool. Of course, your science is right in many of her generalities, but her premises are wrong, or at any rate very faulty. By the way, sinking is the future fate of your British islands. The first on the list of victims that have to be destroyed by fire, submarine volcanoes, and water. France and other lands will follow suit. When they reappear again, the 7th subrace of the 6th root race of present mankind will be flourishing on Lemuria and Atlantis, both of which will have also reappeared. Their reappearance following immediately the disappearance of the present isles and continents, and very few seas and great waters will be found then on our globe, waters as well as land appearing and disappearing and shifting periodically and each in turn. What?
So he's talking about the end of the 6th root race and the last or the 7th subrace of the 6th race. That's, I don't know how many millions of years in the future. But it's not anytime soon. But he's saying that everything goes up and goes down and then reappears again. So, yeah, it's just the way it is.
It's interesting that the root races have their own continents.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It doesn't seem like it's necessary, but maybe that needs to be wiped clean too. Maybe the energy of the land needs to be changed.
It probably does. It probably has to go through a purification process.
Like, what's it called? Crop rotation. When you have to rotate the crops on the land.
Yes. You have to let it dissipate and recover.
Yeah. Wow. And when Lemuria and Atlantis reappear, to me, it wouldn't even make sense that the same dirt is there again. It's like things shift so much. Like, it's almost like a mixture. It's not the same dirt that rises up.
Who knows?
The tectonic plates. That's weird. Huh. Okay.
And there is a transformation, obviously. Like, for example, all of the petrified objects from millions of years ago that were living things and are now mineral.
Mm-hmm. True.
They used to be a tree, and now they're minerals.
The bones of woolly mammoths have decomposed, and now that's soil.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I say, it all gets ground up and repurposed and purified in the process.
And I wonder why it's the British islands that sink first. They're the most evil?
Probably. No. I doubt it.
I mean, wouldn't it stand to reason that America would sink too?
Oh, it will. It absolutely will. No, they don't all go down at the same time. It's one after another.
All right, let's keep going. Trembling at the prospect of fresh charges of contradictions, he's funny, at some future incomplete statement, I would rather explain what I mean by this. The approach of every new obscuration is always preceded by cataclysms. Now, what's an obscuration? Again, what we talked
That's at the end of a cycle. It's not a full pralaya, but it is a kind of change of scene.
Okay.
Everything goes dark, everything goes into a pause, and then after the obscuration, it comes to life again.
So the approaching of that is always preceded by cataclysms, either of fire or water. Huh. But apart from this, every ring or root race. Okay, so ring is a root race.
They were still struggling with terminology.
Chain, ring, chain, and root race might be the same.
Yeah, this was very early on, and it got confused sometime.
Every one of those has to be cut in two, so to say, by either one or the other, by fire or water.
Right. I think what he's talking about is that at the end, everything that rose to a certain level of prominence and productivity declines and becomes more and more evil. And the most evil aspects of that have to be separated because they're like the driving forces. Mm-hmm. You look today, and it's the evil actors in the world that have to be separated from the rest of humanity. Without them, the rest of humanity doesn't keep following them. So they have to get rid of these top leaders of evil.
Thus, having reached the apex of its development and glory, the fourth race, the Atlanteans, were destroyed by water. You now find only their remnants, whose sub-races each had its palmy days of glory and relative greatness. What they are now, yours will be someday, the laws of cycles being immutable. When your race, the fifth, has reached its zenith of physical intellectuality and developed the highest civilization, remember the difference we make between material and spiritual civilizations, unable to go any higher in its own cycle, its progress towards absolute evil will be stopped, as its predecessors, the Lemurians and Atlanteans, the men of the third and fourth races, were stopped in their progress toward the same by one of such cataclysmic changes.
So, as I was saying, at the end, each one of these becomes more evil. And so those leaders have to be separated off from the ones that can still be saved.
Wonder why they devolve. I thought we are all becoming more enlightened on our path.
Well, we are. Some are more enlightened towards darkness. They choose the material, the personal gain over anything else, and they can bring lots of people with them.
I never considered that our root race is going to have to be wiped out too.
Yes.
I thought okay.
No matter where you are in the cycle, you're going to have those who are more spiritual, more in tune with nature, and those who are more selfish and selfishly motivated. Some of those can still be saved. Some of them cannot.
All 60 billion souls right now, the process that all 60 billion are going through, that whole thing is called a chain, kind of, right? The whole 60 billion souls.
Yeah, it could be called a chain.
I thought that at the end of the chain, all 60 billion have evolved more spiritually than when we started.
No.
That's the process of evolution, though. That's the process of expansion.
It is, but we're given a chance. We can go up or we can go down, and some people choose to go down. It's just the way it is. It's not like every single person is going to become enlightened.
Well, not in this chain, but I mean, every person will eventually.
Some will make it to the top and some will remain behind. It's the way it is. It's nature in process.
Wow. Dang. And through all that, individual people will reach enlightenment, will reach Buddhahood.
Well, beyond that, because they will become Dian Chohans.
Even though the entire scheme is not really evolving that much. The entire 60 billion group of souls.
It's evolving tremendously.
Well, that was my question. So at the end of the cycle, 60 billion souls will have gone from some grade to a higher grade as the prodigal son does.
Right. And some of those will have graduated. A certain portion of humanity will reach the level of Dian Chohan at the end of this grand cycle.
And there are 7 root races. We're in the 5th right now.
But we're talking only about the human round. Each one of these stations is a root race in this one single round. And then there will be a 5th and a 6th. There's still the Adept, the Buddha, and then the 7th round is the Dian Chohans. Millions upon millions upon millions of years from now.
Okay. All right. So just as the predecessors, the Lemurians and the Atlanteans, the men of the 3rd and 4th races, they were stopped in their progress towards evil as well by one of such cataclysmic changes. Its great civilization will be destroyed, and all of the subraces of that race will be found declining in their respective cycles. After a short period of glory and learning. Oh, wow. After a short period of glory and learning.
Because remember that we have to keep always in mind that the race is both the physical form and the individuals inhabiting those forms. So the more advanced ones come in at a certain point and it rises to its apex, and then they go on to something else, and you start getting lower quality souls. So
They leave it to us, and we're not ready to self-manage yet.
Exactly. And so we squander it. And we're like, burn the books. We don't need them.
See the remnants of the Atlanteans, the old Greeks and Romans, the modern all belong to the 5th race. See how great and how short, how fleeting their days of fame and glory were, for they were only sub-races of the 7 offshoots of the root race. No mother race, any more than her sub-races and offshoots, is allowed by the one reigning law to trespass upon the prerogatives of the race or sub-race that will follow it, and certainly not to encroach upon the knowledge and powers in store for its successor. Thou shalt not eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil that is growing for thine heirs. We may say with more right than would be willingly conceded to us by the Humes of your subrace. This tree is in our safekeeping, entrusted to us by the Chohans, the protectors of our race and the trustees of those that are coming.
So one of their major functions is to protect knowledge and keep it out of the hands of evil actors. They want that information because they can do more destruction if they have that information. So the hierarchy is given that charge to keep it protected and not share it with the wrong people who are just dying to get their hands on it.
That's very real. I mean, right now, there are many organizations and people who would love to know what the Atlanteans knew. Like, how did they make these vimanas, these flying ships? How did they generate power without a power plant? Did the pyramids create power, free power wirelessly somehow? People want that. And yeah, it seems like it's for good reasons, right? It does. Like Nikola Tesla, you think, but give someone a lot of special power, even some magic, maybe it'll turn from altruistic to gray, then maybe to black, once they realize how much they can do with it. And that's probably why all these civilizations decline.
So we see more and more clearly why every single applicant has to be tested, and tested some more.
Ethics and morals come first, then here are some powers to work with.
And very few, very small at first. And sometimes even a little bit is too much for people, and they go wild and they have to be cut off again.
Who are the several chelas that we've heard of? Not Babaji, who was the other one? There's several of them that have used black magic and hurt themselves or even died because of it. We've heard that already.
Yes, and the other thing he's pointing out is that each group, each race has to learn everything on their own.
Right.
Even though their predecessor reached a certain level, you can't just turn it over and all of a sudden you're at that level. It doesn't work that way.
That's one or two levels more macrocosmic than our own reincarnation cycle. The exact same thing. If we were born in our next life with immediately all the data, we'd be like a 6-month-old baby doing algebra. That doesn't make sense for nature. We have to relearn in our new life, but we relearn faster the subjects we've already learned. And that's what we hope happens civilizationally, civilization-wide. When Atlantis rose, they hopefully learned things faster than the Lemurians did, but they had to learn it. That's the same exact process. You can't just give it. That's cheating. It doesn't work that way.
And keep this in mind. Members of the hierarchy, the really more advanced ones, they've experienced all of this and much higher on other globes. So theoretically, they could just offload all of this information to everyone, but it doesn't work that way. They wouldn't appreciate it, they would misuse it, and it would be a disaster. So each civilization has to learn their lessons on their own.
Try to understand the allegory and to never lose sight of the hint given you in my letter on the planetaries, the letter in answer to yours, I believe, where you questioned me about C.C. Massey, Staten Moses, and Mrs. Kingsford.
And that was when he got back from London in the previous year, and K.H. wrote that letter. I think it was in our session number 13. It was letter number 18 whenever we discussed that.
At the beginning of each round, when humanity reappears under quite different conditions than those provided for the birth of each new race and its sub-races, a planetary has to mix with these primitive men and to refresh their memories and reveal to them the truths they knew during the preceding round. Hence the confused traditions about Jehovah's, Osiris's, Brahmas, and all the rest. But that happens only for the benefit of the first race.
All right. So the first root race has a Dian Chohan as its progenitor, and they teach them. So in the very beginning, there's this very high, elevated concept, and then they turn it over to the sons of the fire gods, those who are advanced in the hierarchy but are not yet necessarily Dian Chohans, or they could be lower levels of Dian Chohans, but the secondary group.
You're right. The terminology is confusing, though, because he's saying at the beginning of each round. That implies the beginning of the whole thing, not just Atlantis, Lemuria, and our current one.
Yeah, you are right. Because it was describing the beginning of our world, if you're talking about the Bible, Jehovah.
Atlantis did not have their own, but the first race wasn't even physical. They didn't even reproduce the way we do. What the heck?
It's interesting, but keep in mind, too, that at the very beginning, in the actual round, that the first round was to establish the mineral kingdom, and yet these monads were basically humans from some other previous system who are now needing to go forward. But in order to do that, they have to recapitulate. They have to go through the mineral kingdom, go through the plant kingdom, go through the animal kingdom before they get back up to speed.
Oh my
Only
gosh.
then are they able to go forward. Yeah.
This is
mind-boggling, and yet it is enlightening.
It is. And again, that's another macrocosmic view of how the embryo develops in the womb.
Exactly.
Does it
It
not
has
go
to
through
go
all
through
the-
all the same.
This is amazing.
Mhm.
It's the duty of the latter to choose the fit recipients among its sons who are set apart, to use a biblical phrase, as the vessels to contain the whole stock of knowledge, to be divided among the future races and generations until the close of that round.
So basically, the prophets, if you're talking about the Christian way of explaining things, they have individuals that they note are very advanced, and so they designate those as the ones to come in at various points to raise it back up in vibration and in purity.
Or to be teachers,
To be teachers, yeah.
to hold the knowledge. Wow. Why should I say more, since you must understand my whole meaning, and I dare not reveal it in full?
Ah, yeah. He's treading on sacred ground here. I better be careful.
Every race had its adepts, and with every new race, we are allowed to give out as much of our knowledge as the men of that race deserve.
And no more.
Wow. The seventh race will have its Buddha, as every one of its predecessors had theirs. But its adepts will be far higher than any of the present race. For among them will abide the future planetary, the Dian Chohan, whose duty it will be to instruct or refresh the memory of the first race of the fifth round men after this planet's future obscuration. After this planet's obscuration. The planet itself. So he mentions the planet's future obscuration. That's not the race's obscuration.
No, the planet's obscuration would be the planetary pralaya.
And then when the fifth round starts, the first root race of the fifth, so we're in the fourth round.
Mm-hmm.
When the fifth round begins, the first root race will need to be refreshed by the planetary.
Yeah, read that again.
The seventh race of this round will have its Buddha, as every one of its predecessors had theirs. But the seventh race's adepts will be far higher, because that's the last race of this round,
Right.
than any adepts here. For among them will abide the future planetary, the Dian Chohan, whose duty it will be to remain and instruct or refresh the memory of the first root race of the next round after this planet's pralaya.
Right. And that would be the round that is for the making of adepts. That would be the end of the human round.
So we're in the last one of the human round.
We aren't. The seventh race. He's talked about the sixth and then went on to the seventh, the last. He just said the last.
Yes. And in the seventh race, of course, there will be a Buddha, but there will also be the future planetary. So the future planetary might not be the Buddha in the seventh race. He might be someone else in the hierarchy at that point, but then he graduates to be the planetary.
The planetary would be in the next round.
Right.
So one of those that attained Buddha in that round will go on to be at least one of them, or a number of them will become Dian Chohan.
He's implying that there's one Buddha, but I guess there could be more than one, right?
because we've had 24 Buddhas in I don't know how much time, but even our own race has had several Buddhas.
Oh.
Not from our own system.
Okay.
We only had one so far as I know, unless any since then have made it.
My goodness. Meanwhile, to show you that not only were the races not invented by us, but they are a cardinal dogma with the Buddhist lamas and with all who study our esoteric doctrine. I send you an explanation on a page or two in Rhys Davids' Buddhism book. Otherwise incomprehensible, meaningless, and absurd. It is written with the special permission of the Chohan, my master, and for your benefit. No Orientalist has ever suspected the truths contained in it, and you are the first Western man outside Tibet to whom it is now explained.
Thomas William Rhys Davids lived 1843 to 1922, so almost exactly the same time period as Sinnett. He was a prominent British scholar of Pali and a key figure in establishing the academic study of Buddhism in the West. He was the founder of the Pali Text Society in 1881, so just 1 year before this was written. And obviously, he was intuiting some real truths from esoteric Buddhism, and so they were paying attention to what he was writing.
Wow. Was he a theosophist? We'll go ahead and end this session there, and we'll pick up next session with question number 6 of 8 in that same letter.
No, there are 29 questions.
6 of 29 in our next session.
Yes. After this next one, actually 7 and 8, they start going into the scientific ones, and that becomes a different realm. So we'll see how that works out, but it'll be a little faster and a little more cut and dry.
All right. See you next time. Thank you.
Thanks for watching.